Perfect. Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to have you here with us today. It looks like we have over 30 participants from across Ontario joining us for our Apprenticeship 101, a guide for LBS practitioners webinar today. We're thrilled to have you here. We would like to let you know in advance that this webinar is being recorded so that we can share it on our LBS Apprenticeship Toolkit page. Now, we will be talking a little bit more about that page shortly, so stay tuned for more details about that. To let you know as well, this slide deck includes 2 pages full of links to a whole source full of different external websites and resources that we're going to be talking about throughout today's session. We are going to be putting a PDF copy of the slide deck in the chat later, so you can download it and keep a copy for yourself, and all of those links will be clickable. Speaking of the chat, we welcome you to please put any of your questions or comments in the chat throughout today's session. We have put aside a little bit of time at the end of our session to address your questions and have a conversation. So as we are getting ready to get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Summer Burton, and I'm a co-executive director at Literacy Link South Central. Jan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jan Gorley, and I am the project manager at Literacy Link South Central.
Perfect. Okay. As you are settling in, and I hope you will take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, we also welcome you to visit the following website. And that website will pop into the chat for you in a moment as well. Now, we recognize that during online sessions such as this, we often come from different areas around our province, and this website that Jan has popped in the chat will allow you to explore the land on which you currently sit and accurately acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who call the land where you work or reside home. So to begin today, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we want to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all of the lands that each of us is on today. While we meet in a virtual platform, we'd like to take a moment to recognize, respect, and acknowledge the importance of the lands which each of us call home. Today, we ask you to reaffirm your commitment, and we reaffirm ours, to improve relationships between nations and our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Let's remind ourselves that wherever we are, we live on the ancestral and unceded territory of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people. Our agenda today is to talk first a little bit about how LBS supports apprenticeship and the skilled trades, both provincially and in frontline programs. We're going to be sharing some key information about the apprenticeship system, talking about different pathways into an apprenticeship, walking you through the process of being an apprentice in a step-by-step kind of fashion. We're also going to introduce you briefly to our Step Up and Succeed initiative, which is tying back to that LBS Apprenticeship Toolkit we talked about earlier. And as I said, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So starting off with how we as a network system are already connected to the skilled trades in Ontario. First of all, the Learning Networks of Ontario, which are the 16 regional literacy networks, much like Literacy Link South Central, that are available across the province, participate in a community of practice to discuss apprenticeship. Through the Learning Networks of Ontario, a series of pop-up PD webinars is released every year, and I bet you're familiar with them already, many of which are focused on apprenticeship and the skilled trades. If you are a social media person, then hopefully you have followed the hashtag #HereForApprentices. That is a campaign that points out the deep connection between Ontario's literacy and basic skills system and the skilled trades across the province and how we can work together. Also sharing success stories of collaboration within the skilled trades is the Apprenticeship Connection newsletter that's put out by the Learning Networks of Ontario Apprenticeship Subcommittee. You may also find podcasts called Here for Apprentices, just like the hashtag that we mentioned earlier for social media. And L&L members often will attend skilled trades events or provide information sessions and presentations for organizations that are connected to the trades. We do that to both help the apprenticeship and skilled trade system recognize what adult literacy is, but also do direct referrals and help connect people to both their local regional networks as well as frontline programs. There was a lot of work that was done through the Skills for Success funding that was available up to, it was about 18 months altogether worth of funding. That was specific to apprenticeship, and that includes over 300 LBS resources that were developed, including 87 that were specifically focused on apprenticeship. All 16 of the regional literacy networks that I mentioned earlier with you participated in outreach to a number of different organizations in the skilled trade system. And that's everything from trade unions to pre-apprenticeship programs to apprenticeship TDAs and larger organizations like ApprenticeSearch.com and Skilled Trades Ontario. Nearing the end of that Skills for Success funding, LBS programs participated in 120 pilot programs. Now, while the bulk of them were focused on supporting underrepresented groups, several of them were focused on supporting the skilled trades as well. Provincially, and to qualify this, this is based on our CMSM data from 2023-24. LBS programs served almost 4,000 learners that were on the apprenticeship goal path last year. What I find really interesting is that 500 of those learners already had a certificate of apprenticeship or a certificate of qualification, which means that they had completed an apprenticeship and still needed support from LBS at a foundational level. And over 800 learners were referred into LBS by pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship training programs. That's quite a lot of numbers, but the one thing that I think is important to recognize is that given how goal paths in LBS work, that number is really a lot larger. It doesn't really take into consideration learners who were, as a next step, pursuing a high school credential, which they needed to sign an apprenticeship contract eventually. Within LBS programs, and really this is the part that most of our LBS practitioners in the audience know best, there's a great amount of support for the skilled trades. So LBS practitioners can help learners understand the skilled trades and what an apprenticeship actually is. They can point out when a learner's job goal may actually offer apprenticeship opportunities, because not everyone knows what trades or jobs are connected to apprenticeship. And they can definitely identify what skills learners already have and which ones they need to improve to be successful in the skilled trades. Math has a tendency to be a big one there. And all of this is, of course, done within the individualized and contextualized nature of LBS programs, which really help everyone inside the skilled trades or not be successful. So all of this to say, across the LBS system, we offer a lot of support for apprenticeship in the skilled trades, but there are still many ways that we can grow. Like with a lot of our learners, it starts with a foundational understanding of some key concepts. So that's what today's presentation is about.
All right, so let's continue to dig in a little bit more and talk a little bit more about some of the important information surrounding apprenticeships. So to start off with, who's who in apprenticeship? And some of these terms can be a little bit confusing, and it's important to understand them when you're looking at the process of moving through an apprenticeship into becoming a journey person. So first of all, a pre-apprentice is someone who has not yet begun an apprenticeship. There are pre-apprenticeship programs that are offered that allow a learner to explore a trade. An apprentice is someone who is registered, who has a sponsor, and has begun to work on becoming a journey person, a skilled trades person. And they're accumulating skills and hours that are necessary to take their certification of qualification exam or earn their certification of apprenticeship. A journey person is someone who has completed their apprenticeship and is now moving towards becoming a fully certified member of the skilled trades. So once an apprenticeship is complete, a journey person still needs to do some work within the skilled trades. And once they've completed their certification of qualification exam, they would then be independently working in the trades and could look at doing things like training others or running their own business, for example. A sponsor is the entity, the organization, or the employer who takes on an apprentice and is responsible to make sure that the apprentice completes the hours and learns the skills that they need to learn to complete their apprenticeship. Their sponsor may also be their trainer, but not necessarily. So the trainer is the person who is directly responsible for helping an apprentice acquire those skills that we're talking about during their apprenticeship. And a mentor is typically, not always, somebody who is outside of the organization that an apprentice is working for, who can offer some insights and support and help towards completing their apprenticeship and just gaining an overall better understanding of the trades, as well as a person to be a sounding board and to offer support if there's any kind of struggle or challenge happening on that journey. Along with who's who, it's also important to understand the what of apprenticeship. And so there are some important terms to understand related. Compulsory trades, for example, can only be worked in by registered apprentices and licensed journey persons. So you don't need to be a registered apprentice or a certified journey person to work in a non-compulsory trade. However, there are some non-compulsory trades that do offer certifying exams and through which you can earn a certification of qualification. So I apologize, a certificate of qualification. Certificates of qualifications are available for 60 non-compulsory trades and also the compulsory trades, and they confirm that you've passed the required certifying exam for that trade. On top of receiving a certification of qualification, or C of Q, there's also the Red Seal program, and that sets common standards to assess the skills of skilled trade professionals across Ontario. So if a Red Seal certification is achieved, that means that this tradesperson can work anywhere across Canada and does not have to recertified when moving from province to province. Next slide, please. So there are several ways to enter into the skilled trades and to begin an apprenticeship. And we're going to look at these different entry points and their benefits. Next slide. So one of the first entry points is the OYAP pathway. Some of you may be familiar with OYAP and may be thinking to yourselves, well, OYAP is for high school students. However, OYAP is also for adult learners. If a learner is at least 21 years of age, has at least 14 credits earned, and is enrolled in adult learning towards credit completion, they can also enroll with OYAP. This then means that they have the opportunity to complete co-ops towards their credit completion. And there are many benefits to that. So number one, it gives the learner an opportunity to try a trade at no cost to them. They also get support from OYAP to register them, and they get exposure to an employer during their co-op placement that can lead to an employment situation after their co-op ends, including a potential apprenticeship. One of the most important benefits as well is that co-op hours can often be counted toward the hours an apprentice needs to accumulate and complete their training. So the co-op hours completed through OYAP can often count towards their apprenticeship if they decide to continue pursuing an apprenticeship in the trades. Next slide. Another option is the pre-apprenticeship pathway. So similar to the OYAP pathway, learners who do a pre-apprenticeship get to try a trade with little or no financial commitment. During the workplace portion of their pre-apprenticeship, they'll also get exposure to employers, and this can then, again, lead to employment or being taken on as an apprentice. During the pre-apprenticeship training, learners often are given the ability or the opportunity to earn free credentials. So for example, something like a working at height certificate. This can save the learner time and money and also increases their employability factor to potential employers. Next slide. Next is the employer pathway, and this is what I would say would be the traditional pathway, or the one that most people are familiar with. During the employer pathway, you're looking at working directly for an employer. It's a great option for a learner who's confident that they want to enter a particular trade and they know where they want to be. They are going to need to find their own employer sponsor, very similar to the process of applying for any kind of a job. There's many supports available to help learners connect with employers to begin an apprenticeship. So for example, Employment Ontario can help learners connect with local employers interested in taking on apprentices. Workforce planning boards also often have job portals or job matching boards to help candidates get connected. Apprenticeship, I always mess that one up. Summer's going to be laughing at me. I always want to say apprenticeship search. ApprenticeSearch.com has a skilled trades focused job board, and the Apprenticeship Navigator has an exploration section to apply for local apprenticeship opportunities as well. So there are many ways for learners and potential apprentices to get connected to an employer sponsor. Next slide.
And I think now's a really good time to mention that we're going to be providing links to all of these resources that Jan mentioned to you on those 2 slides at the end of the presentation.
Absolutely. And the final pathway, again, a more traditional pathway, would be the college diploma pathway. This may be a good option for a learner who feels maybe they just need a little more time. They'd like to continue to learn and grow before moving into an employment. It's important to note that a college diploma is an option that a learner will need to pay for, and that once completed, for all compulsory trades and those 60 non-compulsory trades that we mentioned, they will need to find still an employer sponsor and complete an apprenticeship and leveled schooling to enter their trade. So a college diploma for those trades is not enough. With a variety of entry points and learners having a large variety of needs and goals, every journey into and through the apprenticeship process is going to look very different. So not only are there these different pathways into apprenticeship, but the process through apprenticeship can vary from person to person. However, once a learner does sign an apprentice contract, many of the steps that they follow are very similar. So let's go ahead and take a look at that process.
Okay, step 1 is going to be qualifying to make sure that you can become an apprentice. And some of the key things to know about who qualifies to be an apprentice is an Ontarian who is at least 16 years of age, that has legal permission to work in Ontario, so has a social insurance number, meets the educational requirements for their chosen trade that are outlined by the Ministry of Labor, and those that would be required by the employer they're hoping to sponsor them in the first place. Those things don't always align. That's important to know. And of course, they need the sponsor. Now you'll notice a little splash on the screen here that says there's an educational requirements chart that's coming. We're going to be releasing that as part of the LBS toolkit we were talking about. So when you want to qualify for an apprenticeship, you need to sign an apprenticeship contract and your academic requirements will be checked. And what will officially qualify someone to sign up for an apprenticeship depends on the trade. So there are some trades which require only grade 10 and proof of a full grade 10, and many that require a grade 12. So I'm sure we're all familiar with a lot of these credentials, but I'll run us through them very quickly. The Academic and Career Entrance Certificate, which is earned by passing 4 units of the Academic and Career Entrance course. It's offered through Ontario colleges and is free to attend. That certificate qualifies you to sign an apprenticeship contract. An Ontario Secondary School Diploma also does. Of course, that's provided by adult high schools through earning up to 30 or more credits in a high school. And there's also no fee for that, although there are often book fees. As a reminder, the PLAR process is a really great opportunity for adult learners to shorten their journey towards an Ontario Secondary School diploma, as Prior Learning Assessment and Recognition, or PLAR, can actually grant credits to adult learners based on their previous life and work experience. So it can really make things a bit easier and feeling more manageable for them when it comes to earning an Ontario Secondary School diploma. You'll notice the asterisk next to the OSSD, and that's because it's good to know that regardless of needing to sign an apprenticeship contract saying you might need a grade 12, some employers will actually require specific high school or college credits, particularly in the more technical trades like, I've lost it. I had one I was going to say, electrician. There it is. Took a minute. Like electrician, many times employers in the electrical field will want to see additional tech credits on a high school transcript, that will bring somebody up higher in their ability to sign them on as an apprentice. The new Canadian Adult Education Credential, or CAEC, which is replacing the GED, or already has, is that very large 5-part test that covers writing, reading, math, science, and social studies. And it costs $100 to write. It's offered through TVO ILC. You could also achieve that required academic credential by having a foreign high school level credential or higher that's been assessed for equivalency in Ontario by WES, ICAS, or CES. And we'll give you some links to those at the end of the presentation as well. Now, experience in the skilled trades can also be assessed for equivalency in Ontario through the T process. And that T process will allow the Skilled Trades Ontario organization to assess someone's previous experience, be it outside of Canada or even just outside of Ontario, as well if it's experience in the skilled trade that's been gained while in the Canadian military. They can actually assess that as well to see if what they have learned and demonstrated in those other areas can be assessed, and they can actually challenge right up to the C of Q if they are assessed as having equivalent experience. So that is the Trade Equivalency Assessment, or T process. So we've done step one. We now have the credentials that we need to sign a contract. The next, and this is something Jan talked about, is finding a sponsor. So that sponsor is the person who signs you up as an apprentice, provides your apprenticeship training. And something that was on the slide that Jan pulled up earlier was that there are both employer sponsors and group sponsors. And group sponsors are something that not a lot of people know about, but they're an excellent choice for somebody who's trying to find a sponsor in the trades. An employer sponsor is one business that will hire someone as an apprentice. A group sponsor is a large organization that hires many apprentices and then essentially shares them out to different employers for work experience. That group sponsor takes care of signing the actual apprenticeship contract and does the initial apprenticeship training with the person that they've hired. Then they go out to the employer, and if the employer likes them on the job and feels they've shown good work ethic and will be a good member of their team, that apprenticeship contract is then sent over to the employer, and the employer takes it on. So they act almost as an intermediary. So getting that employer sponsor is an important next step. There are lots of places that learners can get support with that. They can obviously, as Jan said earlier, get support from Employment Ontario, workforce planning boards, apprenticesearch.com, the OEAP program. Pre-apprenticeship programs will also, because of the fact that you have a work placement as part of them, give you an opportunity to meet and prove yourself to employers. Unions and trade organizations may be able to help with this. Colleges, especially those that have support, employment supports for their learners and students. Local companies themselves, there's a really an important step to be said about networking at this point, which if you don't get out there and start talking to local companies, looking in online resources, maybe finding organizations that represent or support the trade that you're interested in, it really can expand the opportunities that people have. And it helps develop those communication skills and interpersonal skills that are so required on the job today, too. And then some of the group employment sponsors that we wanted to mention were Support Ontario Youth, or SOY, Merit, Landscape Ontario, or LO, and the Christian Labour Association of Canada, or CLAC. All of these are group sponsors that take on multiple different apprentices throughout the year. And what's interesting is many of them also take on apprentices from a wide variety of different trades. So it's not like they only take on bricklayers or they only take on millwrights. They may take on a whole host. I think SOY is currently up to 13 or 14 different trades that they will sign people on for and then connect to an employer. So to register as an apprentice, learners are going to need to create a My Ontario account. And that is created through the Skilled Trades Ontario portal. If they want, they can certainly walk themselves through that process. It's a lot like a lot of other online registration forms. If they are with a group sponsor, though, the group sponsor will actually help them with that registration, which is really helpful. If a learner needs support with creating that My Ontario account and registering as an apprentice, one of the resources that you may be interested in, and again, that will send you a direct link to, is CLO's Apprenticeship Answers curriculum. It's called How Do I Become an Apprentice? And it literally walks through screenshots, one after the other, of how you can start the process of creating an account, confirming your account, and walk through each step of registering your apprenticeship. Skilled Trades Ontario website will also offer information on how to navigate their own My Ontario account. The Ontario government's apprenticeship website has information about this as well. And the EO apprenticeship offices, Employment Ontario apprenticeship offices, are available for advice too. And they actually have a toll-free number that you can call if you're interested in getting more information. We'll put that in the chat at the end, but I will mention it is 1-800-387-5656. And calling that number can provide some advice for learners on how to proceed with their apprenticeship registration. Picture ourselves going through the apprenticeship registration. We've created our My Ontario account, and we're now registering our apprenticeship. We need the following information. So the learner is going to need their social insurance number, their mailing address, their email address, and it has to be active and one that they can access because they need to confirm through like a secondary email that they'll get that they are in fact registering themselves for My Ontario and registering their apprenticeship. It's a two-step process. They need to already have a sponsor. They can make the My Ontario account without actually being an apprentice yet. You can get through all of that prior to your apprenticeship starting. But when you're registering the apprenticeship, you need to know who your sponsor is, their phone number, contact information, full legal name, full mailing address, and business phone number. And there have been a couple of situations in the past where the sponsor's business name does not match their legal name. And so that's why we put this in here specifically, their full legal name. The apprentice needs to know what they are registered as associated to their business number. They also need to be able to report on when they start with their sponsor and how often they will be working. What are their work hours per week? Now, this process will be something that is a challenge to navigate potentially for the very first time you do it. But one thing that will become easier is that often apprentices will change sponsors throughout their apprenticeship. So they may begin, we'll use the group sponsor as a really good example. When they first sign up with a group sponsor like Support Ontario Youth or Landscape Ontario, all of that organization's information is going to go into this form. Then if they are sent off, you know, they've had a placement and tried it on with an employer and it's a really great fit for both, then their apprenticeship contract will go over to the employer and this information needs to be updated. So particularly for apprentices who work their way through the system and maybe have a few different employers along the way, this will become a little more natural for them. After you have registered as an apprentice, you're going to sign a training agreement. And that's not just the apprentice, but also the sponsor. So you'll get an email from the MLITSD saying the apprenticeship has been approved, and the learner and their sponsor then need to log on to My Ontario account to sign that training agreement. Now, we have mentioned here MLITSD is responsible for that. There are changes happening within the apprenticeship system across Ontario, and Skilled Trades Ontario, or STO, is taking on a lot more responsibility for the apprenticeship system in Ontario. So it's possible that this will be changing, but no, today, this is the process. After signing your training agreement, you get to start training. So most apprentices spend about 80 to 85% of their training learning on the job with their mentors and trainers. They spend about the other 15 to 20% of their training in leveled in-school classes. What is so helpful to know is that what the apprentice is going to learn on their on-the-job training is completely outlined in the apprenticeship training standard for their trade. Many trades also have a logbook that both the apprentice and their trainer use to sign off on each of the skills demonstrated on the job. And they're not held secret. Both of these things can be found on the Skilled Trades Ontario website. Really helpful because somebody that you're working with in an LBS program may not fully understand all of the different responsibilities that they would be tasked with in a skilled trade that they're interested in pursuing. Taking a look at that apprenticeship training standard will give them a much clearer idea of the sorts of work they'll be doing and therefore the kinds of skills that they'll need to be successful. Now, there are more than one way to check skills when it comes to apprenticeship, and it's really important that the employer and the apprentice work together to make sure that hours are tracked, that they are working, as well as the skills that they are developing are tracked. And that's what a lot of the things like the logbook are for. We do, however, also recommend that all apprentices keep copies of their pay stubs, even though it's not necessarily something that you want lying around all over the place in your living room. It's really important to keep copies of pay stubs that show the hours worked so that when there is a minimum hour requirement within a trade, and that's listed as well on the Skilled Trades Ontario website, that they can prove they've worked those hours if for some reason their employer cannot prove that for them. The in-school portion of that training can be one of two things. The first is day release training. I have to be honest, it's not as common, but it refers to when an apprentice attends in-class training one day a week. So perhaps they work with their employer Monday through Thursday, and on Friday, they go to their in-school portion of their training. What is much more common is block release training, and that happens about once a year, roughly. It's once they've completed a certain number of hours and have developed a certain number of skills that it's time for them to essentially level up, to use gaming terms. They are done their level 1 training, and now they need to go into school, do the in-school portion of their level 1 training, take some tests, have some assessments, and then assuming that they successfully complete that in-school training, which is generally about 8 to 12 weeks long, they will become a level 2 apprentice instead of a level 1 apprentice. Now, there are some very important things for apprentices to know about block training in particular. And the first is that they are not working at the same time as they're in school with block release training. That means that they will leave their employer and no longer be paid during that time period. They can and should apply for employment insurance to make up for lost wages. And there are some very specific ways that they can fast track getting that EI so that they're not waiting 6 weeks while they're in an 8-week training course to get some of that funding to help them. The other thing that's important to know for apprentices is that not every trade is available in every area when it comes to in-school training. That means that apprentices may need to be prepared to leave home and live away for 6, 8, 12 weeks when their block release training comes. And that is not going to be possible for all people, which is a reality check that some people need to think about when they're considering the trades, is whether or not there is going to be a likelihood that they can train close to home if travel is not possible for them. I'm thinking of single parents as an example with young children may not be able to leave for 12 weeks. So something to keep in mind. Just like the apprenticeship training standard that we talked about, a curriculum training standard is also available for the trades. Same theory. You or your learner can look at the curriculum training standard and find out exactly what will be taught in trade school. And things like, how is each section weighted? What percent do they need to earn in each of their activities in order to pass? And passing is very important because when they do, they get to go back to their employer as a level 2 apprentice at a higher wage than they were earning before. As a reminder, getting support from an LBS program is a really good way for people to prepare for apprenticeship training. We know that when it comes to on the job, so many people who are drawn to the skilled trades are excellent at doing this work, whether or not they feel competent and comfortable writing an essay about how they do the work or answering a 50-question multiple choice test about how they do the work is potentially another story. And that's when all of us can step in and provide some of that support. So the final certifications, there are several, and Jan's mentioned a couple of them earlier. So I want to walk you through them quickly. The first is for completing the trade and finishing all of your hours, achieving all of your competencies, passing all of your levels, and it's automatically provided. It's the certificate of apprenticeship. It is provided by MLITSD, and for some, that will be the last step on the skilled trades journey. They're done with their training. For others, there is a certificate, a provisional, I can try that word again, certificate of qualification. And that is for trades that have a qualifying exam. So apprentices in those trades will receive that provisional certificate, which is basically like you have a year. You have a year and you need to go write this exam. So it's their sort of temporary card or temporary ticket. And within that time period, within that year, they need to go and pass that certifying exam, and then they can continue working in the trade. The full certificate of qualification, of course, comes once you've passed that. It's in all of the compulsory trades and in some of the non-compulsory trades as well. Really, the curriculum training standards are really helpful to find out whether or not there is a qualifying exam. And on the Skilled Trades Ontario website, at the very bottom of the trade description for every one of the 144 trades in Ontario, it will tell you whether there is a certifying exam or not. The Red Seal exam is the last one, and it is an additional exam that you can take in several trades in not just Ontario, but Canada, that provides you with a red seal on your certificate of apprenticeship or certificate of qualification, literally on there. And it will show that you've demonstrated skills that are transferable in the jurisdictions that govern the skilled trades all across Canada. So if you do not have a red seal and you are, let's say you're an electrician, we'll use that one again. If you're an electrician certified to work in Ontario and you decide to move to BC, while you can absolutely work through some of the trade equivalency assessment and hopefully be able to challenge that exam, if you can't prove that you've got the equivalent skills as what is taught to electricians in BC, you may need to restart your apprenticeship, which is incredibly frustrating. So for those Red Seal certified trades, it's a great opportunity for people to, let's say, put some money in the bank for the future by getting themselves certified in a way that is recognized across the country.
All right, so before we talk about Step Up and Succeed, I do just want to acknowledge in the chat window We've added lots of great information in there for you. And we have a couple of participants who are also adding some wonderful information. Within the LBS toolkit that we're going to be talking about in a moment, there is some great information around financial supports available for apprentices. And one of the topics that's come up is that there are EI, employment insurance codes that are available that apprentices can access while they're in their block release training. And so that's important to note because for some, the idea of losing their wages for 8 weeks or 12 weeks would be a barrier. So it is important to note that the government is now acknowledging that and providing EI to those who are in those class leveled training. So moving on though, the Step Up and Succeed project is our skills development, I apologize, I'm losing my words. Our skills development funded project. There we go, I got it. And so the Step Up and Succeed initiative is really focused on strengthening the skilled trades by addressing the needs of several key partners across the skilled trades landscape. It's also really focused on forwarding the messaging that LBS programs are a key partner in the continued success and growth of the skilled trades workforce. So we are encouraging and supporting the key partners in the skilled trades landscape through a variety of initiatives. One of those partners that we're aiming to support is small and medium-sized employers. We're aware that they're crunched for time and they don't have a lot of supports like large HR departments and safety departments and those kinds of things. So we have created an employer resource hub that has tools and tip sheets and guides and fillable templates and videos, all kinds of support mechanisms to help employers with attracting candidates from a broader talent pool, as well as information on how to support and retain their apprentices. So within this hub, we talk about things like engaging apprentices with LBS programs to support any upskilling that they might need to be successful and to be able to stay employed, rather than an employer potentially saying you don't have what I need and sending them on their way. We're also holding in-person and virtual employer events. And at those events, we are sharing the resource hub and all of the fantastic things it contains. And we're also sharing that message about who literacy networks are, what the LBS programs are and what they can do, and how this system supports apprentices with the upskilling that they need to be successful during apprenticeship and moving beyond into their journey person roles. Next slide, please. Another important, very important partner that we're supporting is you, our LBS community. And we're doing this by holding this webinar today, as well as our upcoming webinar in January called LBS and Skilled Trades Training, a Model for Collaboration and Success. That's coming up on January 23rd at 1 p.m. And in that, we're going to be talking about how to build those collaborative relationships between LBS programs and training delivery agents who are often offering those pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. We're also developing an LBS toolkit full of resources specifically for frontline LBS facilitators to use with the learners in their programs. And so there are some documents specifically aimed at supporting LBS facilitators, and there are also a variety of curriculum documents and other exploration documents to actually support the learner who might be interested in pursuing an apprenticeship. And we're going to add information on how to register for that webinar and information about this upcoming LBS toolkit into the chat window here for you shortly. We do want to let you know that the LBS toolkit is currently online and accessible. However, the resources, those 9 resources that are going to be coming to the toolkit, are still under development. You will find there, though, that there is already a recording of a webinar that was created in conjunction with Apprenticeship Connections. And we will be uploading today's webinar, the accompanying slides, and a transcription to that LBS Toolkit website as well. And as the resources are developed, the curriculum documents and navigation guides, we will be opening and adding those. There are 2 resources currently accessible, and they are examples. So they are draft resources that we invite you to take a look at so that you can gain an understanding of what's going to be available there for you. Next slide, please. So as Summer mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we have developed a couple of slides that contain all of the links for the variety of support organizations and information that we've shared with you today. There are actually 2 full pages worth of links, so we invite you to take a look through them and access them at your leisure. And certainly we're here and available to support you if you have any questions around any of those. Next slide, please. Excellent. So now we're going to open the floor to any questions that you might have. And while we're talking about questions, we're going to go ahead and throw some information in the chat window for you as well.
So if anybody has any questions, we welcome you to please raise your hand. We would love to help you out, or throw more questions in the chat if that's more comfortable for you.
Adam, I see Adam has his hand up.
Hi there, but maybe I'll show myself. So I'm just wondering about the CAEC. So whether we're anticipating any sort of resistance to that. I know it took a while for the GED to be accepted among some employers. So now with this change, do employers even know about it? Are we? Yeah, I didn't think so. But if we tell them, or if the person tells them it's GED, that'll be enough. Or what are we? What what's the deal there?
What I have found so far, and obviously my experience is not going to be the same as everyone else's experience, but working a whole lot with the trade unions in particular, what I've been hearing is relief, because they all found out that the GED was going, and they were relying on it as something they would often recommend for their tradespeople as a way to, and we can argue how true it is, but as a way to quickly get certification so that they could sign an apprenticeship contract. So there was quite a bit of concern in and amongst many of the employers that we've talked to about the loss of the GED. And when we tell them that, okay, it's all right, it's been revised to reflect Canadian content and renamed the Canadian Adult Education Credential, but it's still delivered the same way and represents the same thing, it has been warmly received in my area. That said, if you ask an employer right off the bat, do you accept the CAEC? You may very well get blank stares. So there's an opportunity for us to share information about that. They'll still know what the GED is. And so far they're believing it when we do say it is the same thing. Great question. Thanks, Adam.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Any other questions we can chat about? Brandy.
Hello, I don't have my camera on today, but I just wanted to ask this. Thank you for sharing the slideshow deck, the PDF. Are we allowed to use it and share it out like on our website or with or modify it to our local area?
Yeah, let's chat about how a modification could happen. You absolutely can share it as is. And Brandy, we're going to be putting it on our website as well. So you're more than welcome to, utilize it in what way works the best for you. And yeah, feel free to drop us an email. We'll talk about modifications.
Okay, thank you. This was fabulous. I am so enlightened, and I am just like having so many like aha moments right now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brandy. Erica.
Hi, I am a student success advisor at Confederation College in Thunder Bay for the academic upgrading program. So students often come to me with the goal path of possibly a trades possibly an apprenticeship, sometimes unknown, sometimes kind of known which area they want to get into. What I find it difficult to find on my end is the path to direct them on, one, to guide them whether they absolutely need the ACE certificate or the grade 12 equivalency, or two, the next steps after they complete that. I feel like different trades, different apprenticeships have different pathways in, and I'm not always sure which way to guide them, who to guide them to, or I've even looked on with some students, I've looked on the Skilled Trades Ontario website to see exactly what qualifications are needed, and I find it very vague. So is there somewhere, or maybe this is coming up in the LBS thing that what I already signed up for? So if it is, then that's great. But if not, is there some clarity on any of that?
Yeah, so first we hear what you're saying, 100%. There's two answers. First is we are putting together a chart of all of the academic and educational requirements required for each of the trades. That is something that we're doing and will be released to you. So that will be a reference piece that you can grab and utilize with your students for sure. The question about it's hard to identify exactly what is the right path is valid and probably will not necessarily have an answer because of the fact that it's varied from learner or student to learner. It's what may be right for one person is going to be finding a group sponsor, and we do really love group sponsors, finding a group sponsor and working with them at trying to get that apprenticeship contract signed. What's right for another person, and I have to say it's often better for a lot of people, is finding an employer in the skilled trade you want to work for and not necessarily asking to be signed as an apprentice, but instead asking for a job, looking for work as a general laborer or a skilled trades helper, which is an unsigned but adjacent to apprenticeship kind of role. I used to work with someone in employment services who had the best analogy ever, and I share it all over the place, of when somebody is looking for an employer to sponsor their apprenticeship, that if they don't know the employer and the employer doesn't really know them, I mean, first of all, apprenticeship is a big commitment. It's a big commitment on behalf of an employer who is going to invest their time and energy into training someone who may know very little about the trade that they want to learn. It's an investment in following a whole lot of rules and guidelines because it is overseen by Skilled Trades Ontario and the Ministry of Labor. You don't just train what you want, you have to follow the curriculum training standard. There's a lot to it. And so it's, as this gentleman used to say, it's a little bit like asking someone to marry you before you've ever gone on a date. So having the opportunity to work with someone in a general laborer role, have the learner try that out, prove to the employer that they are someone they want on their team. And once they've had a chance to demonstrate their skills and their commitment, then making that ask can sometimes be a lot more successful than when you hear people talking about, well, I can't find somebody to sponsor my apprenticeship. I can't find anyone to take me on as an apprentice. Sometimes you got to date first.
Can I add, Summer, as well, that when it comes to sort of navigating the processes, definitely I would suggest that our LBS toolkit is going to be very valuable. One of the things that we're doing, and it will be a curriculum style document, is a resource currently called Getting to Know Apprenticeship, or Getting to Know the Trades. And that might change slightly, so watch out for that on the toolkit. But it is a document that's going to afford a learner the opportunity to explore those different entry points and to also explore the process through the trades, very similarly to how we've shown it to you today, but it's going to give them the opportunity to do that research, to go online, look at some websites, check in on the different registration requirements, like if they wanted to pursue OYAP, for example. It will also, another resource that will be there is the financial piece. So we will be sharing information and resources around different grants that are available, and things like the EI possibility for leveled schooling. So I would suggest that some of the curriculum documents that you're going to see in the toolkit could be really, really helpful to have that initial sort of conversation and exploration with a learner so that they can choose a pathway, an entry point, and kind of a process through the trades. And just a final note on all of those thoughts, both Summer's and my thoughts. I do want to say, sometimes I feel that we feel a lot of pressure to be that subject matter expert for learners, but it would be unrealistic to expect that as a frontline facilitator, you would have all of the knowledge of all of the nuances of apprenticeship in the skilled trades. I've been involved with this project. It's been my sole work for almost a year now, and I am still learning things. So there is no way that in your work, I'll be real, there's no way you're going to become, that absolute subject matter expert. So one of the things that's important is for a learner to really understand, and this is going to be important on their journey, that they need to take the lead in getting their own answers, right? They need to be willing to do that exploration and that learning and really get and find information for themselves. And you can be the conduit to, giving them that support and sharing with them that they can do this, right? That they're capable. So that would be my final thought on that one.
Erica, I did see that you had your hand up. I know it's lowered now, but just checking in, wanted to make sure that if you still had a question that we could address it.
That was all. Yeah, that was all. Thank you. Very, very helpful. And I appreciate that last point as well. I try to be all the answers to all the students. But
Exhausting.
am I right to understanding this, that certain apprenticeship programs, for example, electrician, um, I was under the impression that for that you have to go to the union first, pass the aptitude test, and then go on your journey. Some you can go right to an employer. Some you need the college program first. Am I right in understanding that, or is that incorrect? And any apprenticeship could start right at an employer, like you had said. Like, is there specific rules for some and not others?
Usually those rules are put in place by the person who's doing the hiring. So it's less about the trade requires that and more about if in the case of the trade union is the employer. They become part of the employment team. They require an aptitude test because they're not going to invest in the person that they could potentially be bringing on if they don't believe they can be successful. They don't want to bring them into their organization if they don't believe them to be ready and able to succeed. Not every, let's say, Joe's Electrical has him and his one person that he has working for them likely don't have an aptitude test that needs to be completed prior to deciding whether or not they're willing to take the person on. They may be willing to take them on if they have them in as a helper for a bit first and see if they're a good fit, but it's not necessarily the same thing. It's from who's going to sign that contract, who's going to sign the apprenticeship contract, and what do they need. Some will be looking absolutely for a college credit, having achieved, the one-level certificate course, intro to, because that's what they, for their business, believe to be important. But that's not for the whole trade. That's for that employer. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome. As we are at 2 o'clock and we respect your time, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. You'll see on your screen that there is a QR code. That QR code would lead you to a very quick 2-question survey, which I'm sure a lot of you who attend webinars know a little bit about this. We would like to get your feedback just to find out if, and while we've heard you say it out loud, Brandy, thank you, that today was valuable and helpful. We'd love to capture that if you don't mind, and any comments that you have in terms of what else you'd like to see. You know, we're here to support you and would love to hear your thoughts on not only this session, but also future sessions that we can share with you. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you'll see that our contact information is on the screen. Jan is available at jan@llsc.on.ca, and I'm available at summer@llsc.on.ca. I think you see the pattern. You're more than welcome to visit our website or give us a call and leave a message. If nobody answers, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So we want to thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. And Jan has put into the chat the quick link to the survey. So we look forward to seeing your feedback. And thanks so much again for your time. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.